Hello, you're very welcome to the Cryptowriter podcast with me, Jillian Godsil. Today, my guest is a very, very well-known man, Chris Skinner, and I'm very, very grateful for him taking the time out to come on my show. Welcome indeed to the show, Chris.
Yeah, hi, how are you doing?
I'm very good. Now, you are one of the most influential people in technology, and I know this because you got about 30 of these accolades, not just one. Now, they all seem to, perhaps I'm wrong, is it the last couple of years that you've really come into your being? A lot of these awards seem to be 2019 onwards. Have you suddenly hit your stride?
I'd kind of say I've been there all along, but I think what happened is that 20 years ago I became unemployed because I'm unemployable. And I started hobbies that became my job, and my hobbies were basically drinking with people and writing about the future. And luckily, I've been very lucky that that became a business. In fact, several businesses. So I'm a lucky guy.
Putting it like that, it sounds very nice. Can I apply to join your job, your company? I can do that too. I'm sure I can. Now, I have to say, sort of confession time. A lot of my friends and colleagues are huge fans of yours, and I'm not surprised because your writing is insightful. It's interesting. Now, thefinancier.com is your main blog. What are your favorite topics? What do you cover there to give people an idea if you haven't read thefinancier.com? I mean, it's insightful. It's amazing, but how would you describe it?
Uh, um, I mean, I think why people like it is because I don't work for a company, so I say it how I see it and I say it how it is, or that's what I try to do. I'm kind of still a rebel with the cause, and the cause is all about the system of technology and finance and government and politics and the economy and how the world operates. So I don't narrow my blog down to just talking about payments and commercial investment and retail banking and technology. I actually over the years have grown into talking about anything I find interesting that covers politics, economy, society, technology, but it really is always about what's the future, and that's the core.
You have got the best job in the world.
Well,
I'm sending my CV in after this. I want to join you. So I was looking at through your stuff. You are, in addition to your writing, you've published, first of all, I thought 3 books. You publish oodles of books. I don't know where you find the time to do them all. I the one thing I'm just curious too, in terms of, and maybe also in your topics too, the financier, because as I may have given a clue away, the title of this podcast is the Crypto Writer. So when did you start looking at Bitcoin and alternative forms of finance and payments and value? When did that come into being?
oh, geez. I mean, I've been looking at Bitcoin since 2011, a couple of years after Satoshi Nakamoto's paper. I invested in Bitcoin and then lost a load of money in Bitcoin and then invested again in Bitcoin and made a load of money out of Bitcoin. But actually, I'm more preference towards ETH or F or however you say it, ETH, because Ethereum is a smart version of the blockchain distributed ledger technology for businesses that allows them to do smart contracts. Having said that, some people still believe in that, some people don't believe in that. I think we've reached a real inflection point in 2020, 2021, because if you look at how cryptocurrencies have moved in the last year, it's been a quite amazing roller coaster ride of an upward curve. And to me, a large part of that is the more people lose confidence in fiat currencies and governments, the more that cryptocurrencies and democratization rises. And that's what we've seen in action clearly in the last year.
I guess in no small part to, like, for example, governments around the world doing their huge quantitative easing. It's like people, it's great to get helicopter money, which is super when it's needed, but then the implications of that for a country and for savings and for the value of a fiat currency is quite staggering, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I live in my own little head here in Poland, which is where I have my house because I have a Polish wife. And we've been living just outside Warsaw, and every day I wake up and I'm thinking about stuff. And what's struck me is, and I blogged about it the other day, is that money is just a construct in our heads. And that's the weird thing, that when you strip away everything about humanity, and I've actually talked about this a few times over the last year, we are just animals, which we don't like to think of ourselves that way, but we are an animal on earth just like any other animal, a dog, a cat, a gorilla, or giraffe. You know, we are just here on earth living our lives. And the fact that we talk and we have business and commerce and constructs like money and banking and finance is purely fictional and made up. And if you take all of that construct away in your head, then it's a bit like taking the red pill in the Matrix. You suddenly wake up and go, oh my God, the world is not the way I thought it was or is. It's completely different. And I think the pandemic and the lockdown has been my red pill.
So you wouldn't have considered it quite so obviously before. Sorry, my mic is echoing there. So would you have, I mean, the concept, money being a concept and a construct is a fundamental point. And it's, when you think about it, it's very obvious. Of course it is, because this is, we're exchanging bits of paper or lines on a computer. And why does it make one value, and why does it go down? But do you think it takes something like a pandemic to make people think twice about it? Is that what it's working? Is that what the pill was to you?
It's just a belief system. It's a bit like, are you Catholic or Christian or Islamic or Muslim or Jewish? It's a belief system, and that's purely what money is. And that's something that struck me very fundamentally in the last year. But the fact is, and the bottom line is, that if I want to buy something, whatever it may be, I have to provide the construct, the currency of the person who's selling. And that's what's changing with cryptocurrency in the last year, in the last 10 years, because the construct of how we buy and sell is changing. And potentially 10 years from now, the whole idea of national fiat currencies might be torn apart. And I'm not saying it will be, but I can see how people who've been arguing the case for that for the last 10 years have a point, which I didn't see until the last year.
I suppose it's a bit like, I grew up in Ireland, where church and state are still very tightly aligned. In the UK, whatever, I don't know about Poland, but in many countries around the world, they're quite separate. Many, certainly in the developed world, are quite separate. So money and state, bank and state, there's no reason why that in the future could not be separated as well.
Well, it's all about the idea that technology can democratize the world. And when you think about the internet and the 5G, 4G networks, they don't recognize boundaries or governments. And they equally, therefore, don't recognize countries or institutions. So you now have the opportunity to create a whole new network that's completely different to the old one. And on the one hand, I can empathize with that, because I believe in a globalized world, and the fact that because of the network of telecommunications and technology, we can all live being connected to each other wherever we are, no matter how remote or how far away, particularly as we become multiplanetary, which we are definitely going to be. On the other hand, I can see the traction of governments to limit that change and the challenges they have in that change, and that some citizens don't want that change, and most politicians don't want that change. So it's hugely challenging. It's an amazing moment in history.
It's like you were saying earlier about, it's construct, and nowadays we allow banks to do it because it's easy, because they talk about the coincidence of wants. It's unlikely if you have a cow and I have a sheep, we're going to swap, because you probably want a donkey or something. I don't know. It's hard to get it to line up in sort of pure barter. But then, are you watching, and I'm sure you have, the joyful, I think it's joyful, rise of the Dogecoin? Is that something that makes you smile in the morning?
Yeah, it makes me smile, but at the same time, don't have any because I don't believe in it, and I think it's a joke.
Well, it is. I think it's the
It was
ultimate
created
joke.
as a joke, but it's a bit like GameStop and BlackBerry and other stuff. And in fact, complete aside, I've just written 7 children's books. So
I'm coming on to them. Oh.
well, CaptainCake.com. I've written an 8th book, which is FinTech for Kids, which I think is the book that most bankers will give to their boardroom members. And interestingly, within that, I do talk about the idea of exchanging, 3 sheep for a cow, which then someone said to me, "Oh, religious, you've got to change that to, it's got to be 3
Toasters,
sort of frogs for a toaster, yeah, whatever." But basically, it is this idea that when you peel everything back, the world today is global and integrated, but the construct of our financial system and governments are not global and integrated. And the friction between the technology construct and the governmental construct is where I see the real sort of frisson right now. And over the next decade plus, I think we will move to a global currency. What that global currency will be, who knows? It probably won't be Bitcoin. It will be something related to Ethereum, probably, maybe. But the world's changing, and the financial system is changing, the governmental system is changing, and I just don't know whether enough people know what that means or how to deal with it.
do you think that CBDCs, I'm going to say it again, I don't know why it's in that. Do you believe that CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, are a natural stepping path from fiat to crypto, or are they the end point?
No, I think CBDCs are the flailing, sort of drowning moment of governments trying to deal with crypto's rise, and the way in which Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies like Dogecoin or Dogecoin, whatever you want to call it.
Someone was calling it Dogecoin the other day. Dodge, it's dodgy coin.
Yeah, it's like shitcoin.
Or if you're Italian, sheep coin, as Rubini says.
The way they're changing the world. I mean, so I was, and I spend a lot of time in my own head these days, as we all do, because we're stuck at home. But I did an auction yesterday because it was May the 4th of Star Wars memorabilia, and I'm paying in UK pounds, but at the same time, I'm thinking I could just as easily be paying in dodgy coins or shite coins or whatever, because it's and equally the amount I'm bidding for those items is purely based on how many people are at that moment on the marketplace, which goes back to the basic fundamentals of demand and supply and economics. So if we strip everything back to the fundamentals of economics, who's in the marketplace, how much have they got to spend, and who's got the things they want to buy, and what do the things they want to sell have to be paid in what form, and you strip it back to those essentials. That's actually the very basics of how civilizations began 10,000 years ago, which I've written about in Digital Human. But equally, it's where we are right now, and we think we're very sophisticated. We're not. We're animals. We're just basic people dealing in exchange of goods and services for a value based on who's in the market at that point of time and how much they're willing to pay. So the reason why I mention that is, and I'll give away an example. There was a David Prowse signed Darth Vader photograph, and I was on the auction the whole day because I'm into that stuff. I'm very nerdy. But they had several of them during the day. One sold for several £1,000s. One sold for several £100. It's purely who's in the marketplace at that point, at that moment, willing to buy and willing to pay, and what form you pay in.
Are you watching then the incredible rise of NFTs and non-fungible tokens?
Yeah. I actually really, I'm quite into NFTs. I haven't bought any because I'd rather have a physical asset. Yet at the same time, I've argued for a decade that digital asset management is an incredibly important part of the market, that now NFTs display as a clear example of what's happening, which is to say, you don't need to have the physical goods, you just need to have the ownership of the digital art or digital asset. And in many ways, the ownership of a digital asset might be better than the ownership of a physical asset. I've got so many physical assets right now that due to lockdown, I can't claim. I just thank goodness that I took photographs of them, and they're digital.
So you have them. I wanted to ask you a slightly different question. It kind of ties in. I want to go back to your book again. I'm interested in your books. You're an advisor, right? Now, you're an advisor. You obviously have a very wide view of the world, a very progressive view of the world, and you're interested. You look at things, you write about things, you think about things. But I'm really curious, right? Because you are an advisor to the UN, the White House, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum, amongst other bodies. What advice do you give them?
Primarily, what's next in finance and technology. So when I was made redundant many years ago, I started to write research as a freelance consultant around finance and technology. And I've always been interested in the future, because that's what we don't know. The future ain't what it used to be, as Yogi Berra said. Equally, nostalgia ain't what it used to be. So I always focus on what's next, because that's what we don't know. There's no point in talking about today or yesterday, because that's gone. Talk about tomorrow. So I've always talked about tomorrow. And I was ducking and diving and doing a bunch of stuff that ended up with being focused on the future and talking about the future within the construct of banking and technology, particularly because that's my speciality and expertise. So these organizations you mentioned eventually stumbled over me and said, could I advise them where that I see the future of finance and technology? And so, yeah, I've very happily been involved in those dialogues and discussions. But I do the same with a lot of bank boards and a lot of technology companies and fintech companies. So, I duck and dive all over the place.
Do you get tired of giving advice?
Not at all. I mean, if you ever get tired of talking about the future, then you might as well
stay in the past.
Yeah, you might as well, be 6 feet under. The fact is that every day I wake up and I'm excited to think about what's next.
Your books. Okay, I looked at your books, and there's a couple of really pertinent. There's three pertinent questions I got to ask. Why is it important that Captain Cake is a Victorian sponge?
Oh, geez. So maybe we should explain Captain Cake, which is that I've got two little boys who are twins, who I've been locked down with since 2020 when they were 4 years old. And I got bored of telling them stories from Julia Donaldson and David Williams and A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh, whatever. I think they got bored of it as well, to be honest, because it wasn't so exciting. But the trouble was that there wasn't much that was exciting apart from Marvel comics and DC comics and things that are maybe a little bit too mature for 4-year-olds. So I ended up telling them stories about Captain Cake. And the reason why Captain Cake is a Victorian sponge is because that's my favorite cake.
I thought it.
You mustn't forget Lieutenant Chocolate and Sergeant Jelly and Private Potato.
No, I have them too as well. And I love, of course, obviously your love to sweetly go where no sweet has gone before. But the second question, and actually you've answered the third one, what age are your boys? But the second question, which I think is actually very interesting, is you chose superpowers for your merry crew, your candy crew, that aren't like, magic ones. They're like real characteristics. Tell me about why that was important to give them real superpowers that ordinary folk can have.
You've obviously been doing too much thinking, Jillian. In that, Captain Cake can throw cream and jam because he's a Victorian sponge. Lieutenant Chocolate can throw chocolate and caramel because he's a caramel chocolate bar. And Sergeant Jelly can throw jelly because she's a strawberry jelly. Private Potato can't throw anything because she's a vegetable. So, she's on the sidelines. But actually, it's really funny because I've written 7 books now in the series. And I know it's nothing to do with fintech, but it's just my head going stupid whilst I'm locked down. I've ended up creating a veggie crew. So there's a candy crew, which are the cake and chocolate and jelly and sweet potato. But the veggie crew is a Captain Cabbage and a Lieutenant Broccoli, a Sergeant Potato who's a male, and a Private Carrot who's also male. And so I kind of switch them around. So part of my point in the candy crew is that the girls are in the lower positions, but actually the positions don't matter because they have special powers and special capabilities. And then in the veggie crew, it's the opposite way around, which is the girls are in the senior position and the men are junior. It's just playing with roles, identity.
Yeah.
It's trying to educate kids to realize that it doesn't matter who you are and how you look and what gender you are and how you behave. It's all about developing your sort of inner characteristics. And in fact, that's a critical point, which is maybe the conclusion of this part of the discussion. But I'm running a thing called the Portrait Foundation with
an
artist, Bastia Hamilton. And my whole thing today, bearing in mind that I'm not as young as I used to be and nostalgia isn't what it used to be, is that with small children, I want to develop them to be the best they can be. And I don't want them to feel any limitations or inhibitions. So what we should be doing is developing the best of children's creativity and capability and not teaching them to be machines, because machines can learn. And that's what we're doing with technology. Machine learning, artificial intelligence will automate all the things that we can do. So what we need to do as humans and as children in particular is nurture them to do things machines can't do, like create art and create anything. Just think outside the box and be yourself.
Because what do they say? Creativity, critical thinking, and there's one other thing that they recommend.
Emotions.
Yes, it sounds like that. Just rather than learning by rote, because you say, when did you ever, as a human being in the big world, have to say, I must remember this, or I could Google it. I must remember the periodic table. It's going to be so important. Oh, I can Google it, which is mad.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Google doesn't cry.
Oh yeah. Ah yes. That's a whole new topic. We're going to move on. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, just because we have actually kind of diverted into who you are, and a little bit like that, and your kids and your views. So you're a futurist. I want you to look back, and if there was something you could change, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be your haircut. I'm not saying anything about your haircut. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
About myself? Probably the way in which I behaved at university. People never thought I would make it past 30 years old.
Wow.
And I'm still here. I won't say how old I am, but I'm still here. But they thought I was a bit mad. And in fact, I tweeted today that as I laid on the couch and said, do you think I'm crazy? The IKEA assistant said, yes, I'm still crazy.
Oh, that's good, isn't it? You don't want to be boring. Although my children who are growing up frequently tell me, you're not as crazy as you think you are, Mom. Darn it. Okay. Second question. What would be your best achievement?
Well, before we started this conversation, you said maybe my twin boys, which I would say, yes, they're my best achievement. My second best achievement would be the fact that I have had a very enjoyable career that's continued 20 years past being made redundant. And one of the things I blogged quite a while ago now was the best thing that ever happened to me was being made redundant. So the reason I said that is that it forced me to do something. And I would say, if you're ever comfortable in your life, become uncomfortable.
There's an expression that took me years to realize what it meant, but it might be applicable to what you've just said. It's an ill wind that blows no good.
Yeah, but equally, actually, an ill wind blew me a lot of good.
That's exactly. It's an ill wind that blows no good. So it's like with a disaster comes a gift.
Yeah. And I've had several disasters in my life, and every time it's always been something that's made me a better person.
Yeah, that's so cool. Finally, if you had a magic wand, if you were Captain Cake, and you could change, you've got twin boys now, 5 years of age, if you could change anything in the world, and not you, it's not you, this is the world, is there one thing you could do that might make a difference, do you think? Make flowers blue or something, I don't know. Make it sunny in Ireland all the time.
Short answer and long answer. Short answer, save the world. Long answer, use technology to make it that we stop screwing this planet and save this planet. Just before coming onto this call, I had a long conversation with a lady who leads Extinction Rebellion, Gail Bradbrook, and it's a fascinating discussion. It could have gone on for days rather than hours. But my next book is about digital for good and how we can use technology to save the world and society, which sounds grandiose. But I do believe technology can save the world and society, and that we've discovered in the pandemic and the lockdown that we can do everything remotely over a video connection, over Zoom or Skype or Teams or whatever you use. So why do you need to get on a plane? And why do we need to destroy the planet with carbon emissions that are ridiculous? And the most ridiculous part of this is 71% of climate emissions that damage the planet are produced by 100 companies, the fossil fuel companies. They're funded by the banks to trillions of dollars, and the banks need to learn that they have to tell those companies to stop doing this. And it's something that's doable. It's not, a huge issue. It's all to do with stop making money out of screwing the planet. And that to me is the simplest message for the future. Stop making money out of screwing the planet.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. I've enjoyed it. I can't wait to read the book that you're encouraging board members of banks to read. I would buy some and post them personally to some of my banking friends and colleagues. So thank you so much, Chris. You are an amazing man. I love your thought processes. Very interesting. And I can't wait. I haven't read your books. I can't wait. I'm going to buy some books and become au fait with Captain Cake. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Take care, Tina.